Okay, everything is up and running.
Okay, great. And the applicants are in?
They're joining the hearing right now. And the team is available, so we can begin.
Okay, great. Welcome back to the afternoon session of our March 23rd public hearing. We are beginning the afternoon with our public hearing item number 2, and I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation, to take us through the afternoon.
Thank you, Sarah. And as noted, item number 2 is LPC 21-03209. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The Borough of Manhattan, Block 613, Lot 38, 37 to 39 Perry Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. A pair of vernacular Anglo-Italianate style twin houses built in 1855. The application is to amend Certificate of Appropriateness 20-02848 for facade alterations and a rooftop addition, and also to excavate the rear yard.
And commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation, and state your name for the record and you may begin.
John Wool, Stephen Harris Architects for the applicants. Alex, could you bring up the image? 3739 Perry Street. As Corey mentioned, this is an amendment to a previously issued C of A. I believe that this was seen by the commissioners in July of 2019. Since that time, the property was sold to our clients who engaged us to take over the project, and they being new clients and we being new architects, we propose to make a few changes. Next. Located on Perry Street between West 4th Street and 7th Avenue, 3739 Perry is originally constructed as one of 3 in 1855. The 2 buildings, 37 and 39, were joined together as a unit in 1916. So for over 100 years, they've been one building. Next. While originally developed before of the Seventh-day Adventist Church on 11th Street, there was once a larger donut in this block. Currently, the way that it is configured now is that there are 2 donuts, neither of which we participate in. So there is just a small court in the back where 35, 37, and 39 face out onto the back of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. That church currently has no access to that back area, and all of those are frosted or stained glass. Next. Some vintage photos, both the text photo as well as designation. Next. Current configuration. Again, when this was presented to you in June of 19, a full restoration of the facade was approved. Next. Next. The facade has issues, all of which will be addressed in our renovation. Next. Next. Drawings of both the previously approved rooftop addition and our proposed rooftop addition. Our proposed rooftop addition is a bit lower, further back, and full width. The initial one was not fully full width, closer to the street and a bit taller. Existing facade, proposed facade. Like the previous application, windows are being replaced, minor alterations to the ground floor, and the rooftop addition. Next. Again, the 2 side by side, the previously approved and our current. Next. Renderings of the 2. Again, our rooftop addition is set further back. This rooftop addition had been closer to the front. Next. In the rear yard, the kind of court that linked together these 3 properties. So the back of the church is visible to the left. All of the windows are frosted, and there's a 3-foot swath of space that the church still owns that they really don't have access to, but their church is not exactly on the lot line. Looking at the existing condition of the rear, again, we are proposing to excavate this area and change the fenestration on these lower portions of the rear. Next. Next. Great. The condition of some of the rear right now. Next. The ground floor portion. Next. Okay, so this is the proposal in the rear. What you see here now is the rear on the left, the existing, and the proposed. Our proposal has the rooftop addition set back from the rear approximately 5 feet. It has maintained the 4-bay spacing of fenestration on the top 2 floors. It asks to change that fenestration on the parlor floor to 3, and then it has reorganized the openings on the ground floor into a larger opening. Again, this is facing onto the church, which has no clear glazing facing in this direction. It does not face any neighbors. Other than that, there are 2 adjacent side neighbors through lot line windows that can see into this obliquely, but this is not facing any residents. Next. The previously approved and our proposed. So the amendment here is to change the parlor to 3 openings instead of 4, and change the fenestration on the ground floor, as well as excavate into the rear yard. The previous approval has excavation under the main building itself and the rear extension. We are proposing to extend that further out, not to the lot line, but further out into the rear yard. Next. Previously approved and our proposed. Next. The previous application, as approved, had lot line windows into this narrow light well with the adjacent building at 41. Our proposal is to forego that and just eliminate the use of those lot line windows. This gives you an image of what that space is like. Next. So existing and proposed, previously approved and proposed. Existing section, previously approved section. So the previously approved section had excavation underneath the entire existing building. Our proposal is to excavate that a little bit further down. We want to go down, I think, about another 16 inches. And we also want to extend the excavation into the relatively shallow rear yard. We will maintain approximately 5 feet 3 off of the church to the north of us, approximately 1 foot 6 off the lot line. There are currently no trees growing in this courtyard. Next. This is the proposed. There you see the lot line that exists between the church to the north and us to the south, and where the excavation will be occurring. Also, you see the location of the rooftop addition, and the fact that it's pulled back, at least the glazing is pulled back. The roof extends a little bit to the rear facade, but the glazing is pulled back approximately 5 feet. Next. Existing rooftop conditions. Next. Existing and proposed plans. When the buildings were joined in 1916, obviously they had a full party wall that separated the 2 buildings. As they are currently configured, approximately 30% of that party wall has been removed over time. The previous approval for the plans kept about 25% of that remaining. Our proposal keeps about 20% of that party wall remaining. Next. Again, full width room in the front and the back. Next. Next. On the roof, the portion of the project that has very minimal visibility is this portion here of the exterior fireplace, which is pulled back from the Perry Street facade, but has very, very minor visibility as seen from Perry Street, and tiny, 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 tiny bit as seen from the far side of 7th Avenue. Next. Originally approved penthouse and the proposed penthouse. Next. Existing and proposed conditions as seen in an axonometric. Next. Originally approved axonometric. Next. Next. So from the corner of West 4th Street and Perry Street, nothing is visible. This was mocked up. When you get just across the street, there is a tiny, tiny portion that you see rising up there above the cornice. This is the maximum visibility. Next. And then this is an attempt to try to show with a lot of zooming what really isn't visible to the naked eye, that through the railings of the adjacent 33 Perry, we see a tiny, tiny corner of this mock-up, but we really couldn't see that with the naked eye. We could see that only by zooming in here. Next. And this is the front facade of our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we'll move to public testimony, and we may have questions after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance, as always, and then get to everyone else. So I'll now turn it over to Anthony Fabre to take us through the testimony.
So it seems like Anthony's computer froze, so I can bring people in.
Thank you, Rich.
Sure.
That'd be great.
So we have 2 people who signed up. I will bring in Kelly Carroll. So just 1 second, I'll bring her in. So Kelly, I brought you into the meeting. If you can just unmute yourself and turn on your camera, and you have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you so much. Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. Last week, the public heard much commissioner discussion about how the erasure of the legibility of 14 to 16 Fifth Avenue as 2 buildings, both from the inside and the exterior, was a factor in considering its total loss of character. With that in mind, HDC finds it inappropriate that these twin buildings appear as a single mansion on the rear facade as currently proposed. In the previous proposal, the rear elevation clearly expressed 2 buildings via a solid masonry division down the middle, which inferred the presence of a party wall. As currently proposed, the implied party wall is erased because of a large window opening proposed in the center of both buildings on the parlor level. While the glassy garden addition is appropriate, the upper stories should remain as previously approved. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. And next up, we have Sarah Atman, who I will bring in. All right, Sarah, I've brought you in, and when you have a second, just unmute your microphone, turn your camera, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Sarah Bean Atman, Village Preservation. Too often, row houses that define the Greenwich Village Historic District are erased through a series of what may appear to be relatively minor changes. However, cumulatively, those changes can have a profound effect on the streetscape and the character of the district. 3739 Perry Street were built as 2 row houses. The commission in the prior approval, a prior approved application asked that the applicant maintain the 2 cornices in order that the distinction between the 2 houses be maintained. We ask that the downspout between the two houses continue to be maintained, and that the fenestration at the rear also be maintained, so that these continue to read as two houses as they were historically constructed. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised, and nobody else had signed up to speak.
Great, thank you. And did we receive any additional written testimony?
Yes, we did receive a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2, and they recommended approval of the ground floor window, the penthouse, and the rear yard excavation, and the rear facade windows on the ground floor, and recommended that the parlor floor preserve the 4-window configuration of the 2 original houses, and that the important architectural element of the central downspout be preserved to divide the 2 separate original houses rather than the non-historic impression of a 4-bay wide single house.
All right, thank you, Rich. Okay, I'd like to turn back to the applicants. John, do you want to address the comments in the testimony? It's really largely about the design of the rear facade and the reading of them as 2 buildings.
Certainly. Perhaps, Alex, you could bring up both the previous approval and the proposed, and we can look at that image together. Relative to the downspout removal, I believe, was approved. The central downspout removal was approved in the previous public hearing, and our amendment does not seek to change that. Relative to the rear, I think if we could go to that image. So again, on the front of the building, the designation of the 2 houses, both with the cornice being maintained and the window openings being preserved, as experienced from the public right-of-way, this will definitely look as it does today, just much better, but it will still look as 2 separate houses. And even though the house has been joined together for over 100 years. Can we look at the rear, Alex? Okay, so on the rear, we are sensitive to this question, and we are maintaining the 4-window punched opening scheme on the upper 2 floors. What this proposal seeks to do is on the parlor floor only, which again faces onto the blind wall of the church, meaning there are no clear windows on the church. This difference between the 3 openings and the 4 openings is really not visible from anywhere. There are 2 lot lines, as we know from this donut, that has a few punched openings in it. Very difficult to see this at that obscured angle. And then also the church does not have any kind of clear glazing or views out onto this. And so we don't feel that this change is meaningful in regards to the way that it participates in a larger dialogue with the donut and other houses.
Okay, thank you. Oops, and I think we do have another question. Commissioner Shamir Barron, please go ahead.
Yes, I think I'm just trying to understand what you all think of the Bromley map, the 1916 map. And I'm assuming that indicated that the site was once one lot that was the garage. Do you think?
Alex, could we pull that up, please? I think the Bromley map shows the 3 houses in this terrace. Can you zoom in on that, please? Oh yeah, it's labeled as garage.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. And it looks like one, it's the one to the right, yeah. It looks like one lot rather than 2 lots.
Yeah, because, well, in 1916, so the building was joined historically, from what we can see, somewhere between 1911 and 1916. So at the time of the drawing of this map, 1916, it was probably already joined. And it did go through a series of uses over time. So that garage use must already have been established early in 1911, 1912, 1913, somewhere in there. Thanks for pointing that out. I think it's very useful to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. This backyard, I mean, this donut is one of the most remarkable inside block experiences in New York. So I just really, I want to understand what did go on there behind the church. It's amazing. Okay. Thanks.
May I make a point, Sarah?
Yes,
Sorry.
please, go ahead.
Hi, it's Stephen Harris. one of the distinctions between the 3 and the 4 windows on the parlor floor is not architectural whim. It is that this particular owner has an extraordinary art collection. And when you have 4 windows, the amount of wall between any 2 windows is significantly narrower, and therefore will not accommodate some of the work that is intended to be hung there. We've gone through hanging every piece of art in the whole house. And just to a large degree, that fenestration pattern was a product of how much wall we had left in between them. I would reinforce the fact that while we completely agree about the visibility of it as historic from 1855 being 2 separate houses, there is virtually no place in which you can read the parlor floor from the back. So there's no public visibility. There's virtually no private visibility because the back of the church, as John pointed out, those are service spaces on the back of that church, and they have frosted glass, or if there's glass at all. And, you know, they're pretty much blocked up on the lower floors of the back of the church. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, commissioners, I'm starting to request to unmute you all so that we can make a motion to close the hearing and begin our discussion. And Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Yes, second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And actually, maybe, can you go back one slide to that sort of the interior view of the rear? Yeah. So as has been presented, this is the commission previously approved rooftop additions and alterations to the rear and restoration of the front. We have a new application today. They're still proposing restoration at the front. A different rooftop addition, which is not visible now from a public thoroughfare, except for a piece of the chimney, which is minimally visible, and restudying the configuration of the fenestration at the rear, and then extending the excavation to be 5 feet away from the rear property line, which is consistent with our typical requirements. So the big topic, I think, in our discussion or in the testimony so far has been about these rear windows, which, as the applicant stated, face the back of the church, and and I think this picture is taken from within its own rear yard. But even within its own rear yard, you can see that level is obscured from view by the extension. So the upper floors, which are more visible to the rest of the block, would maintain the 4-bay fenestration pattern. So that's as I understand it from the presentation, the testimony, and the response. So let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this one?
Yes. The roof additions are fine. The front facade has been previously approved, and I think that's fine. The back facade, the rear facade, I find the original, if you can go back to the elevation of the rear facade. I find the approved one, yes. The one to the left, I find it quite harmonious. I think it's quite lovely. It works very well. And the 4 windows, I mean, it's classical facade. The new facade on the rear facade, go to the rear facade.
The rear facade, Alex?
Mm-hmm. I'm actually controlling the presentation. It would be
Oh.
helpful if you get a slide number on that.
I think it's the next one.
Slide 19.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. The rear facade, as previously approved, works well for me. I think it's quite nice. I'm concerned about the new facade. I mean, I understand the idea of the paint, and I understand the issue from the interior, but I'm concerned about how by shifting the window where the solids were and the glass were and the lower, there seemed to be a penetration of the glass into the masonry elements, and that kind of discord, that kind of modern discord, bothers me somewhat. And I'm wondering, I'm having difficulty deciding if we should just keep it as a classical, simple facade, or to accept the modern
Okay.
shifting. On the lower level, I think the proposed rear elevation I can accept on the ground level.
Okay.
The parent of it, yes.
Okay. All right. And I don't know whether the lack of visibility of that parlor floor from any of the adjacent spaces helps with that, with your thinking about that. But
I'm just looking at the facade, just the facade.
all right. Commissioner Gustafson.
Okay, I have no problem with the rooftop addition, barely visible at all. The proposed excavation is fine. And while, in a different circumstance, I would be focusing on the distinction between one building and two buildings. This is, as Commissioner Shamir Barron points out, a very unique donut. It's completely enclosed, and there's absolutely no way anyone can see anything. So I find it extremely difficult to limit them on the on those bottom two floors. So in a different circumstance, I might want to do something different. But in this one, with that limited visibility, this is fine.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Yeah, I think that, what these architects do is often, it's very sensitive, I think, to the kind of historic feel of the building, but also, it's sort of the artistic aspect of the buildings themselves. I think there's always an incredible sensitivity to that. So, and that makes me want to sort of trust what they're doing, because I suspect that they, by extension, the owner has a sensitivity to this. I mean, this whole, so I feel very strongly that I think I could approve everything that's being proposed here. And especially because my sense was that the Bromley map actually indicated that there was less of a case to be made for the forever notion that these were two separate buildings, or that there have to be two separate buildings that need to be articulated as distinct from one another. I mean, I think that the four windows in the back at the second floor, I prefer that, but I don't think I would keep them to it. And I think that what they propose is fine. I think that what happens though in this rear yard, in this donut, it's not so much that it's out of visibility, it's that it is everyone who lives on this block covets this backyard. I mean, it's like, it is such a special experience that actually there really is a lot of, and this is not the visibility we typically point out because it's not public visibility, that is clear. But it is something that's just, every last fragment of this rear yard is precious. So I just wanted to point that out, that it matters here. But even still, I think that what they've proposed is appropriate. That was long, sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford-Smith.
I think given the unique circumstances of this building, having been joined at a very early date and not being able to see the back, I think I can find the three windows on the second floor, the parlor floor, appropriate. Although I think I would prefer the four windows. I understand the desire to have more wall surface. And I think in this circumstance, I can find it acceptable. And I think the rooftop addition is fine.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Holford Smith on all of that, and I think I can find this appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Well, I mean, the reason that it's important, if it is important, to maintain the identity of the two original buildings is not necessarily because of their visibility, but because of our responsibility to hold on to the historic artifact irrespective of its visibility. And that's a principle that we have returned to over time, in my recollection. So I personally would suggest that they remove the center window and have two windows, which they can enlarge on the parlor floor. But that, we have consistently asked, when you have a condition like this, especially where the identity of the building as expressed in the front and as expressed through the party wall, which is still largely in existence, the materiality of these two buildings is as two buildings. It's true that they've been joined for a long time, and I think that the notion of expressing them as two joined buildings is appropriate, but I think that the buildings should retain that dialectic, that conversation between a single building and the single conjoined building and its origins as two. So I think that the back facade, both on the ground level and on the parlor level, should retain some recollection of that division. And I also would say that the applicant should work with staff to retain as much of the party wall as is possible. We saw an application on 14th Street, the corner building on 9th Avenue, where the applicant made special note of the retention of the party walls in a multi-building arrangement. I thought that was appropriate there, and I think it's appropriate here, where to the extent that it can be achieved.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, this raises an interesting question for me, which is that both Commissioner Gustafson and Commissioner Goldblum are making logical and points, which is that one is about visibility. And I do find that, Mark, you can jump in as a counsel. I do find that Commissioner Goldblum's suggestion is a good one, which is that on the second floor, when you combine the four windows into a pair of twos, that may be more, in line with the thing. But out of curiosity, historically for the LPC, when it's totally not visible, which is the correct way to go if you had to pick one over the other?
Is that a question? I think in cases where the rear wall faces another rear wall and is not really visible from within the interior of the block, we have allowed for more flexibility, and particularly at the basement level where it's sort of just at the ground floor, and here it's again facing a wall and below garden walls that are maybe adjacent, and in this case flanked by buildings. So where something is really kind of hemmed in by other buildings, I think the commission has allowed even more flexibility. And with respect to party walls, we have allowed in buildings that were never historically combined the removal of party walls. But at the front facade, we've often asked for there to be either retention of party wall or new wall in that place so that the reading from the outside of the individual buildings be maintained. So, I think keeping some party walls is often something that can sort of retain the integrity of two individual buildings, but it is not something that we've always required, and in fact have approved removal of full party walls. And in this case, the building has been combined since 1916, and I think that history can be considered here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Okay, well, it's that history, as well as the eagle-eye commissioner on the other side of the table from me when we used to meet that way, who noticed the Bromley map and noticed that these lots have been combined now for over 100 years. And I don't recall if this was a recurrent conversation that we had, or that testimony included when we approved this fairly recently. I don't recall all of this conversation and desire to hang on to the two buildings. But for me, and particularly the history, but then when combined with the absolute invisibility of this for anybody, it seems completely pointless, a kind of a pyrrhic academic notion that doesn't relate, in my view, to real life. So I'm fine with it as it is. No windows changed. I mean, the 3 as opposed to the 4 is fine with me. The idea that we don't retain the individuality of it as it might have existed in 105 years ago, that doesn't bother me in the rear at all. And I think the front has been more or less as it's being proposed for a long time as well. So I'm fine with it as it's presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
So in truth, even though we approve this, I just want to talk about the front for a minute, with the goal of retaining this connection to, or this feel that there were two buildings here. When you look at the front, I think the only thing that says that are the cornices. And it's so understated. Now, because now that the pipe is gone, which of course I think was a good move, I personally visually read this as one building. So I just would like to make that point. Because at the base, I'm not reading this as, you know, two separate entrances, separate building, garage. That's how I see it. So when I go to the rear, and by the way, I think the I also the underground excavation is fine. So when I go to the rear, I'm, even though like some other commissioners, I also think visually and contextually the 4 windows is much better. I guess I subscribe to the theory that nobody can see this, and we've approved below the 2nd floor these kinds on smaller buildings. Much.
Jeannie, we can't hear you actually.
You can't?
You're fading in and out. No.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Maybe just stay in one place.
Okay, sorry. We've approved more fenestration at the parlor level than this, so I can approve this.
Okay. All right, and I as well can, I think, you know, in terms of, well, I think this building has an interesting history. It's been combined for a long time. It was identified as a garage on the Bromley map, as we did see, and I think you're right, Commissioner Lutfi, as you look at the front, that sort of legibility of it as a garage building and a combined building is there. And so I think at the back, irrespective of visibility, that the change, while still maintaining sort of a feeling of two buildings above, is consistent with that garage history down below, but also pointing out that this is not visible from anywhere. And because of that as well, I would support this. So, not anywhere from within the donut, I mean. So I believe that we have 7 of us in support. So why don't we do the vote and we'll see where we come out, just make sure we have that right. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you read the motion?
In the matter of LPC 21-03209, 37-39 Perry Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, the application is to amend Certificate of Appropriateness 20028848 for facade alterations and a rooftop addition and to excavate the rear yard. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, noting that the proposed revised rooftop addition will be set back further and will be lower than the previously approved addition, thereby reducing the overall impact of the addition on the historic buildings. That the proposed fireplace chimney will be only minimally visible from a distance at oblique angles from public thoroughfares and will not call undue attention to itself. That the removal of party walls will not be perceptible from public thoroughfares through the punched window openings on the front facades. That the alterations to masonry openings at the parlor level at the rear facade will maintain the solid to void ratio of the rear facade, and the new fenestration will be in keeping with buildings of this age and style. That the proposed excavation will not extend to the rear lot line and will be set back approximately 5 feet from the adjacent building to provide an area for significant plantings in the rear yard, and that the excavation and underpinning will be done in compliance with Department of Buildings regulations under the supervision of a licensed professional engineer or registered architect to protect the building's facades and the adjacent buildings.
Okay, and Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion? Sorry.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
No.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
No.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 8 in favor and 2 opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We'll move to the next item.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next item is hearing item number 3, LPC 21-06272, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 844, Lot 7, 31 Union Square West, the Bank of the Metropolis, individual landmark. A neo-Renaissance style bank building designed by Bruce Price and built in 1902 to 03. The application is to modify ironwork, alter the areaway, and install a ramp.
And Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Julie Rosen from Higgins Quays Barth & Partners Preservation Consultants, and I'll be taking you through the presentation today. Chipman Design Architecture is the architect for this project. 31 Union Square West is located at the northwest corner of Union Square West and 16th Street, highlighted here in red. It's a tall, narrow building with a short facade facing Union Square and over 200 feet of frontage on the side street. Above the ground floor, the building has remained largely intact, but significant changes, largely dating to the 1980s, have occurred at the storefronts and along the base of the building at the side elevation. The ground floor has a small residential entry, accessed from Union Square West, while the remainder of the floor is reserved for retail use. The retail space was formerly a restaurant for many years, and it used this exterior platform here, which was once an areaway for outdoor dining. However, the restaurant lacked proper accessibility to and from the outdoor dining area. Now a new restaurant tenant will be moving in, and modifications need to be made to this altered areaway off the building. The required scope relates to providing accessibility to the restaurant and creating a code-compliant outdoor dining area. All proposed scope will occur at the ground floor, off the building itself, and in the context of storefront infill that was installed in the 1980s. Taking a step back in time, 31 Union Square West was built originally for the Bank of the Metropolis in 1902. The main entrance, you can see here, was on Union Square West, as it is today. And because this was a bank, the base of the building along 16th Street was very closed off with smaller windows covered by heavy grills. An areaway surrounded by a railing, which you can see in this lower right photo, is visible, which appears to have extended along much of the 16th Street elevation. By the mid-1980s, the building use had changed to retail on the ground floor instead of the original bank use, and the window bays and areaway had been significantly altered. These photos from the LPC designation show these changes a bit more clearly. So by 1988, the window bays had been enlarged significantly and changed into storefronts with stone arches and operable doors with side lights and transoms. The areaway had been infilled and raised along much of its length, creating a platform that could be used and accessed through these storefront doors. The historic railing was then reset on top. Since designation, additional changes to railing locations and platform materials have occurred. For instance, this opening has been infilled and bluestone pavers have been installed. Turning to the existing conditions now, this is the west end of the infilled areaway, which abuts a mechanical bulkhead, and the platform cannot be accessed at all from this portion. You can see the historic railing more clearly in the right photo, and the platform, as I mentioned, is topped with bluestone pavers, and the front of the platform is cast stone. At the east end of 16th Street, the areaway is actually stepped, so there's a lower section with railing set on granite curbs here, which is closest to Union Square West, and then it steps up just before this pier. This step up is a bit more visible in this photo. Here's that pier I was mentioning. Railing modifications are also evident, and the entire surface is topped with the bluestone pavers. These photos show the length of the platform over the infilled areaway, which runs alongside the altered storefront bays. As I mentioned earlier, the previous restaurant tenant used this space as a seating area, but it was not code compliant. Access and egress needs were not met, and the historic railing is too low. The outdoor space is an important amenity for the new restaurant tenant, and the proposed scope seeks to make this area code compliant and accessible where it was not previously. All of the work being presented today is happening off the building along this narrow zone of the former areaway. A couple of overall elevations. We have 16th Street on the left and then the Union Square elevation on the right. The proposed work occurs entirely at the ground floor of this large building. Looking first at the Union Square West elevation, we are working with staff on a small scope of work at this elevation, but all of the work we're looking at today occurs off to the side along 16th Street. Now looking at the 16th Street facade, the top is the existing condition and the proposed is on the bottom. And there are three main areas of work that are part of this proposal. At the west side, right here, a portion of the areaway platform and railing will be removed and a new stair will be installed to provide egress to the platform. At the east side, a new ramp will be installed in place of the lower platform to provide an accessible entrance. And then along the length, new furniture and planters will be installed to create a code compliant outdoor dining area. And the scope is shown here in plan with existing on top and proposed on bottom again. And due to a change in grade between the front entrance off of Union Square West and the platform is actually higher than Union Square West, interior steps and ramps are required. And this was always the case. You can see this in the existing plan versus the proposed. But back up to the existing plan, this shows how the space was arranged under the prior restaurant tenant. Exterior doors that provided access into the restaurant and onto the dining platform were not properly accessible due to grade changes and door swing. But in the proposed plan, through the use of door actuators and ramps, entry to both the restaurant interior and to the outdoor dining platform will be fully accessible. So before I go into the specifics of the three work areas, here's a comparative section through the areaway. So when the areaway was infilled and then raised in the 1980s, the area underneath the new slab became essential for tenant infrastructure and for operation, with the installation of ductwork running below, installation of walk-in freezers, and other back-of-house support space. And the resulting platform is now a permanent condition which will remain in place, and the support space below, as you can see it right, will continue to be essential for the new restaurant tenant. The new access and outdoor dining scope in this proposal is being added to this already altered element. So now I'll take you through each scope item, starting with the new stair at the west end of the platform. A section of platform, which is highlighted in gray, just over 6 feet in length, will need to be removed along with two small sections of railing, and the adjacent railing throughout the remainder of the platform will remain in place. A new stair will be installed with bluestone treads and risers to match the existing platform surface. New code required handrails and a simple contemporary guardrail will be made of bronze finished aluminum. This is an appropriate finish for the historic building while also contrasting with the black painted historic ironwork that will remain. The new railings will be attached to the new stair construction and will not impact the historic facade. Looking at the new stair and elevation, the goal is for the new metalwork to read as a contemporary insertion and to stand apart from the historic features. In order to provide cohesiveness to the design, The front surface of the stair will be clad with cast stone to match the material at the rest of the platform. At the east end now, the lower section of the platform, again highlighted in gray, will be removed for the installation of a new ramp. A section of the railing will be reused, which is this western portion, and then a portion to the east will be salvaged and stored on site. The railing and granite curb at the return here, which faces Union Square West, will be retained in place. The new ramp surface will be bluestone tinted concrete, providing necessary traction while continuing the bluestone surface color along the entire platform. The simplicity of the new bronze finished aluminum handrails will allow the new elements to recede behind the historic railing. And looking at the scope and elevation, the existing railing, as I mentioned, will be retained for much of the length, and it'll be raised up to the height of the railing at the remainder of the platform. So in this bottom elevation, you can see that the height will now be consistent along the length. The front face of the ramp again will be clad with cast stone to match the adjacent material. A line of standing counters and planters will be installed along the length of the storefront bays, offset several feet from the building itself. The historic railing will remain intact and in place at the edge of the platform. The historic railing is only 2 foot 4 inches above the walking surface and therefore not code compliant, so we need a range of assemblies to serve as a railing-like element. The planters will have a limestone finish. There's a little cut of the planter here. And it will also be aligned with the columns to reinforce the rhythm of the storefront bays. The metal counters are contemporary in design and will be self-contained units in order to minimize any visual and physical impacts. There are 2 types of counters. There's a taller, longer counter, which is proposed for much of the length. And then on the east side, there's an ADA unit with a lower counter height. And the counters and planters are intended to remain outdoors at all times. The counters will also be anchored to the platform only, allowing the installation to be reversible. Looking more closely at the freestanding dining counters, the counter is a self-contained unit that serves both dining and railing functions. The furniture will be made of bronze finished aluminum with integrated glass, which is shown here, and slim profiles to allow the contemporary installation to stand apart from the historic ironwork. The glass here is rendered in a frosted way to show where it is, but in reality, it will be clear. The 2 counter units, the standard counter on the left, the ADA counter on the right, these 2 units will be similarly designed with a maximum height of 3 foot 10 inches. The counter height at the standard counter is 3 foot 6, and the counter height at the ADA counters is 2 foot 10, with top rails matching the height of the standard counter to provide continuity along the length of the platform. The footrest provides lateral stability to the counter unit, and the 4-inch frame extension at the top serves a backsplash-like function. The standing counters are purposely designed with transparency in mind to allow for as much visibility through the new elements as possible. Comparative views, existing and proposed, show the minimal impact of the accessibility and dining modifications. The simple contemporary designs are seen largely against non-historic alterations, yet they also create a dialogue with the remaining historic fabric at this portion of the building. The installations are also quite low down on the building, and these views we're showing now are very oblique in order to provide the full view of the proposal, but they are barely visible even from across the street. The contemporary nature and transparency of the proposed design allows for visibility through the installations while providing code-required access and ADA access to the exterior platform and code-compliant use of the outdoor dining area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
What is the purpose of the glass?
So the glass is helping to provide, I'll just go up a couple slides. The glass is part of the railing-like purpose that the counters are serving so that there's no void in between the top of the historic railing and the counter surface of the new installation.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, other questions? All right, and Commissioner Jefferson, just go ahead. Go ahead, please. Just accept my request to unmute. Oops.
the color or the material of the new counters, are they black also, or are they different in color?
It's going to be a dark bronze finish. So it'll be bronze finished aluminum. And the idea is to mimic kind of an oil rubbed bronze.
So it's in contrast to the existing.
To contrast, exactly, to allow the
Thank you.
existing to stand apart. Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? All right, and just to follow up on Commissioner Goldblum's question, the purpose for the glass is to have a solid, and that is because at the height of this ramp, you'd have to have 4-inch pickets. Is that right? And this is a way to avoid more pickets.
Exactly, a way to avoid more pickets, allow more transparency through the installation. As I mentioned, the existing railing is only 2 foot 4 inches, and we need a guardrail height installation here, which would be the 3 foot 6.
Right, and I mean the 4-inch spacing of the pickets. Yeah. Okay.
And yes, and yeah.
All right. Other questions? Okay, let's move to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to testify in this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I believe Anthony Fabre is going to be taking us through the testimony. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. So we do have some signups. The first person that I will bring in is Kelly Carroll. Kelly, you should be in the meeting now.
There we go. Thank you, Anthony. Kelly Carroll for Historic Districts Council. HDC appreciates the programmatic need for outdoor dining and standing room in a post-pandemic New York, but this solution is too discordant with the existing architecture and ironwork. The proposed system reads as a part of the architecture, and a more delicate appearing solution would be preferable. Thank you.
Thank you. And next up, I have George Calderaro. George, you should be in the meeting now.
Thank you. George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. The applicant is proposing 3 changes to the ground floor on the south facade of this individual landmark. The VSNY supports 2 of these 3. We support the construction of the new ramp on the eastern end and the new stairs at the western end, as these 2 changes will require removing a minimum amount of historic fence. All are designed so that the ramp and the stairs will be set behind the historic fencing, partially shielding them from view, and have incorporated new materials that will either match the historic materials or, in the case of the concrete ramp, be tinted to match the bluestone in place of at the terrace. However, the VSNY cannot support the installation of the standing counters, finding that these counters directly behind the important historic fence are intrusive and will make it impossible to actually see the fence as originally designed, that the proposed fixtures and glass will detract from the fence and overall presence of the landmark, especially during times when the bar is not open due to weather and operating hours, i.e. most of the time. And that the proposed bronze finished aluminum and laminated glass materials have no relationship to the original. We recommend that the Commission deny this portion of the proposal. Finally, Commissioners, materials stored on site are often lost. We ask that you instruct the applicant to work with staff to ensure the ongoing preservation of the removed sections of the historic fence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is it for signups, and I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
Yeah, we have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 5, and they recommended denial, stating that the proposed limestone base cladding material will be easily damaged, difficult to maintain, and not in keeping with the quality of construction of the original building, that the proposed decorative bronze finished stair rail is neither a high-quality replica of the historic railing nor an unobtrusive modern railing, and the proposed modifications would not be harmonious with the building itself or with the historic district.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Julie, would you like to respond to the testimony?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And I'm just going to flip back to the rendered slides. So I would like to clarify that the modifications being presented are occurring at a previously altered portion of the building. They're seen largely in the context of these non-historic changes, and they're also occurring off the building itself. The new furniture installations were purposely set back from the historic railing so as not to impact them in any way. The use of glass as well. Again, to just clarify, it's shown somewhat frosted in the rendering so that it's visible where we're installing glass, but the intent is that it will be clear to allow as much transparency through the new installations as possible. The railings and counters are also made of thin metal elements to minimize this impact. I would also like to just clarify a couple of things that came up in a couple of the testimony statements and the CB5 resolution. The new bases will be cast stone to match the adjacent material. This is just continued use of an existing material. I think there's also been some misunderstanding about how the space will be used. This is for a restaurant tenant for dining purposes only. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any further questions? Okay, so if there are no further questions, we'll move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And I'm going to start around at where we started this morning. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to lead this discussion?
Sure. I know this location very well, and I think the solution that they've come up with to provide, let me back up and say that I think that the installation of the ramp and the stair are very appropriate, well done, set within this areaway. And I understand the need to provide a code compliant guardrail and the difficulty of trying to do that with this historic low iron railing in front. So I think that what they've done is fairly unobtrusive actually. And I think using the glass is a good idea to give that solidity that without making it be a visual obstruction, even though it's like Julie said, that it sort of renders more translucent than it probably will be in reality. So I can find this application to be appropriate as is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum. Oh, Commissioner Chapin, sorry.
Yeah, I think I can approach this as presented.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree with Anne on the stairs and the ramp. I feel that the glass is okay. I have two concerns. One, in my experience, most times you use a bronze finish, quote unquote, on aluminum. It tends to look almost like black. So I think that the applicant should work with the staff to make sure that there's enough contrast and it doesn't look like a mistake. Because if they're using like a Duranodic color, it will look like a mistake. If it's a light or medium bronze, then there will be some contrast there and it could be okay. The other concern that I have is really the rhythm of the square arch-shaped elements, which I think I have no problem with the glass. I have no problem with the height. I just have a problem with the rhythm that those elements create. It's a rhythm that belongs neither to the building nor to the railings. And I would suggest that they could work with staff to just modify the dimensions of those so that they were more consistent with the railing spacings, which is the surface against which they are understood. I think that if those arches were coordinated with the heavy posts in the railing, you would see that, and this is a good image of it, they're kind of creating their own rhythm that's kind of coordinated with the facade behind, but you don't really read that. You read it right up against the grating. And there, it really has no logic to it. So I would say that it would be a very simple thing to modify that rhythm so that it worked better with the railing. And then it would kind of reinforce the historic material, even in its relocated position, and thus strengthen the relationship that was historically there between the fence and the building.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I have no problem with the case as is.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
I just want to start with acknowledging a little known but really important historic event that occurred on the top floor of this building. And that is the inaugural home of Buyer Blinder Bell. So moving down to the bottom of the building, I was also, as a couple of others have noted, including testimony, fine with the two ends. A little nervous about the railing and the eating stands and so forth. But I think the more I heard, I think it's fine. You know, this is really a landscape, a hardscape of a landscape improvement as opposed to a change to the building per se, I think. I mean, I'm viewing it that way. And so I think a little more forbearance is allowable. I must say, I know this, not only the area very well, but the building very well, and the inside and the exterior of this wonderful restaurant that sadly is no longer, but I look forward to a replacement. It's great to hear about a new restaurant coming back to such an important place.
That's great. Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I was thinking that myself about the restaurant. It was, Blue Water Grill was such a and it will be interesting to see what restaurant goes in there. But with respect to this application, I'm fine with it. I think I can approve it the way it is.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. I think the rhythms could be improved, just the architectural rhythm with the existing. And I think it's appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, there are a lot of positives about this project, and you know, when you're making changes to an individual landmark, you know, it's a higher degree of scrutiny, and I think they've done a very good job in most aspects here of making it accessible and reusing materials, the storage, the bluestone. But I did find, however, that Michael Goldblum did made an excellent point. I couldn't figure out what was confusing about this particular image, and I think it is that the rhythm is wrong, and so I do agree with his limitation.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I think I can approve it as it's been presented. I think it's appropriate.
Okay. Okay, we do have actually enough commissioners to vote to approve it as is. So I guess we'll go ahead and make the motion that way. And then we will still, though, encourage them to follow Commissioner Goldblum's suggestions about making sure that the finish is a light to medium bronze and that the rhythm relate to the railing, because I do think that is a helpful suggestion. So, Anne, would you go ahead and make that motion?
You bet.
Motion to approve.
Yes. In the matter of LPC 21-06-272, 31 Union Square West, the Bank of the Metropolis, an individual landmark. A neo-Renaissance style bank building designed by Bruce Price and built 1902-1903. The application is to modify ironwork, alter the areaway, and install a ramp. I recommend approval with some suggestions, finding that the installation of the ramp at the east end of the areaway will provide barrier-free access to the ground floor commercial space, and that both the stairs and ramp will improve existing egress routes. That a portion of the historic ironwork at the east end of the areaway will be reused and installed on a limestone curb, thereby maintaining this significant feature while providing visual continuity. That limited sections of historic ironwork will be removed and carefully stored on site, thereby allowing these materials to be reinstalled in the future. that the areaway counters and fiberglass planters will not attach to the historic ironwork and will also serve to function as a secondary protective barrier, therefore reducing the need for additional railings. That the design of the counters and handrails is simple and contemporary in nature and does not compete with the more elaborate historic ironwork or building facades. That the use of bronze finished aluminum at the handrails and counters will be in keeping with finishes found on buildings of this age and style and will clearly read as distinct from the historic ironwork. That the use of bluestone steps and bluestone tinted and untinted concrete at the ramp will harmonize with the existing areaway and adjacent sidewalk, and that the work will not detract from the special historic or architectural features of this individual landmark, and that the applicant will work with staff to select an appropriate bronze color to provide needed contrast with the black painted ironwork, and encourage them to work with staff to look at the spacing and the rhythm of the new railing design.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Oh, sorry, Rich, go ahead and call the vote.
Okay. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So that's approved as is, but we will encourage you to continue to work on the spacing and the finishes you developed, the proposal with the staff. Okay, we'll move to the next item.
Commissioners. Next item is hearing item number 4, LPC 21-03327, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1165, Lot 7503, 2101 Broadway, the Ansonia Hotel, individual landmark. A French Beaux-Arts style apartment hotel designed by Paul E. M. Du Bois and built in 1899 to 1904. The application is to replace doors.
And Commissioners, the applicant has joined the hearing. Please unmute yourself and state your name for the record. You now have control of the presentation.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. My name is Mark Faubert. I'm with Shepley Bullfinch Architects. And we're fitting out a outpatient endoscopy center in the subcellar of the Ansonia building. And as part of our work scope, we are proposing to replace the entry doors. And that's basically the only work that's associated with the exterior of the building. This is the front view of the Ansonia, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, the two turrets on the corner. And this is Broadway Street in the front of the facade. This photo shows a blow up of the historical building just after it was constructed. Broadway Street runs along this side and West 74th Street runs along this side. Our project is in the basement of the lower corner of the building, just outside the garage. The entryway in this photo is actually hidden by this building in front, but it's just beyond this building, back on this corner. And this plot plan shows the location of the entrance that we're dealing with. It's again on the back corner of 74th Street, adjacent to the parking garage entrance. The Broadway is on this side. The two turrets are on each corner of Broadway. And this is the plan showing the entryway that we're replacing, or proposing to replace. We are not proposing any changes to the stonework. We are proposing just to replace the doors at the current location. The entryway leads into a lobby area that leads down to an elevator that will lead down to our subcellar suite for endoscopy. This is a photo of the existing doors. This is the entryway as it exists today. There's an infilled window adjacent to our entryway and other entrance facades along the side of West 74th Street. The existing entryway is not code compliant for ADA accessibility. The door widths are too narrow. So we are proposing to replace the existing doors with a new storefront type system, which would be accessible and compliant, ADA code compliant. Again, this is a blow up of the door that we're looking at. The interior of the door has issues with on age and maintenance. Currently, a lot of the hardware is dilapidated and failing. The door hasn't been used in many years, and now we are restoring it to use as the new entrance to the endoscopy suite. The existing paint glazing is single pane glazing. It's non-insulated, and as part of our restoration of the door system, we are including insulated glazing that meet current energy code requirements. We've included photographs of the existing facades along West 74th Street for context. Slide 6 is the entryway directly adjacent to our entrance, and 5 is working along 74th Street towards Broadway to the next entry, and the Margot Cafe, and then working down to the TD Bank on the corner. You can see many of the existing storefronts have been replaced within the last 40 or 50 years, I would say. They're fairly new. We believe these photos 2 and 3 are most likely original to the building. And continuing along Broadway Street, you can see, again, there's been several recent renovations to the existing facades with a more modern storefront type systems at Sephora, Mount Sinai, and North Face. And again, I think photo 6 shows what the original storefront systems looked like. And number 7 is the existing entrance to the residence hall, or residence lobby. The proposed work. So this is an elevation of the area that we're dealing with. This is the new entranceway. And again, the existing doors are currently not 32 inches wide, which is the minimum for handicapped accessibility. This is a blow-up of the new proposed entranceway. The materials we're using are black metal for the storefront system. It's a Hopes storefront system, which is Landmarks approved. And basically, we're trying to maintain some type of classical language in the new doors that we're providing. The details of the door, we're going to be doing true divided lights for all the mullions to replicate the mullions of the existing as closely as possible. And also trying to work with the proportions of the existing storefront as closely as possible to replicate that using the modern materials and hardware that we need to make it accessible. And again, the color of the doors will be black. And that's That's basically our proposal.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. I just do have one question. Because and we have approved asymmetrical double doors to allow for ADA compliant configurations, but I think because of the multi-light configuration, you have a number of proportions that you're then trying to resolve as a result of that. And so I gather the wide mullion or muntin at the transom bar is a result of that. And I'm not sure, but why does the bar, the horizontal bar where the handles are, have to be so wide? And I'm just trying to figure out if there are ways to work on the proportions of these lights. And so I'm just wondering where the bars get really thick, can they be thinner?
Yeah, we reviewed that with the door manufacturer, and you can see this. I'll scroll to the next slide. You can see this dotted line is the panic bar that's on the interior of the door. And in order to accommodate the mechanisms for the latching devices that are required on the door, they needed that type of thickness to accommodate that. One of the doors is on an auto operator for handicapped accessibility. And that's a recessed motor that's in the ground. It's recessed into the ground, so you don't see the closer device on the door itself. So the mechanisms required the proportions of the door.
Okay. Commissioner Chapin, please go ahead.
The historic picture does show a couple of the doors. You can't see some of them completely, but how does your current door, how do you feel that relates to those historic doors? Could we pull that up to front, the picture that's in the original?
Yes, we've tried to be sensitive to the proportions of the door, maintaining the transom and the clear story above. And as far as the panic hardware, and those are things that are required for the functionality and constructability of the door.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Jefferson. You have to unmute yourself.
A question of your door pull, the vertical door pull. The historic or the existing ones had simple door pulls. Why the vertical door pull?
I believe the existing the existing hardware is not original to the door. I'll see if I can bring that up here. Oh. You can see, it looks like there's a pull that's been added here that might be like a Stanley or something that you'd buy at a hardware store that's been added there. And it's only on one side, so it wouldn't be compliant with today's hardware standards. But in some of the research I've looked at, I believe that this entryway may have been a window at one time, because in some of the historic photographs that I've seen, the metal iron railing goes straight across here, which would lead me to believe that it was some type of window at one time, and then it was retrofitted shortly after the building was built.
And if I could just jump in for a second, the The applicant is correct. The staff also agrees that these were historically windows and they were modified prior to designation. The set of doors that are there now are not historic doors. They were approved by the staff a number of years ago, but generally speaking, they, as they exist, match or approximate the window pane configuration that we can see from the historic photo when you zoom in on it. So some of the changes that are being proposed, the thicker vertical style on the inside of the pair of doors, the thicker mullion in the transom, and then that extra rail at the midsection are where this deviates from the existing doors and kind of change the light configuration. And I should also note there is a second set of doors nearby to this that looks like this one currently does. So this application is only addressing one set of doors, but the other one would remain as it is, and the two would not match as it is.
Okay, other questions? Okay, let's move to testimony, and we may have more after that. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak, raise your hand so we can identify you, and I'm going to turn it over to Anthony to walk us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have some signups. The first person that I will bring in is Mark Diller from Community Board 7. Mark, you should be able to speak now. I believe you're muted.
There I am. Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. A slower computer today, I apologize. My name is Mark Diller. I am a member of Community Board 7 and of its Preservation Committee, and with the permission of the chairs, I'll give today's testimony. This is an individual landmark, so of course it carries with it our highest scrutiny, even more so because this building is literally the poster child for the Upper West Side. And by that I mean that the image that we apply to our district needs statement actually had a photograph of the Ansonia on it for several years. This application concerns the doorway to what was once a notorious basement space in this building. But since we have a PG rating for our public sessions, I think we'll skip the former use and go right to the current one. There are, of course, some compromises that are at issue here. There are certain variations that are required in order to allow the space to be used and to be used in a way that is appropriate for a medical office. And quite frankly, at some point or another in our future, making spaces as compliant as possible with accessibility and disability access is an important goal. And so there are always a few compromises that go along with that. Within that framework of A, heightened scrutiny, but B, a dose of reality about wanting spaces to be compliant as possible, our board voted almost overwhelmingly, I think it was 36-1, to approve this application. We found that the choice of use of metal versus wood was a reasonable accommodation under the circumstances because of the need for self-activating door access. The same with respect to the slight deviation where one side of the pair of doors will be slightly larger. I believe it's 1 1/16 or something like that from the other. Our standard in this instance was appropriateness, but not whether this is ideal. We were trying hard to strike that balance for the community without letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. If and when Patisserie Margot, the other business on that West 74th side street, which has the similar doorways, needs to upgrade its entrance, and that day will come. This is a perfectly good model. The choice of metal as opposed to wood also conforms much more broadly with the storefront infill and the window detail of the residential units above. Quite frankly, some of the storefront detail on Broadway is at best unfortunate and on worst also harkens back to the 1970s. So on balance, we believe that this is an appropriate compromise and recommend approval to the commissioners. I thank you for your time. Oh, and the canopy's perfectly okay too.
Thank you. So the next person I'm going to bring up is Sean Corsandi. Sean, you should be in the meeting.
Thank you, Anthony, and good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee carefully reviewed this application as we do all landmarks, whether individual or within historic districts. The application at hand is maintaining the look and finish of the existing doors, but bringing them to code in order to make this landmark more easily accessible for a demonstrated need. Our committee cannot fault them and believes this is a well-considered solution. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is in support of this proposed application. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do have one more sign up, and that will be Lynn Funk, and I will bring her in. Lynn, you should be in the meeting now. You are muted, Lynn. So I'm going to ask to unmute you. You just have to accept.
Yes, I'm
Oh,
unmuted. Okay.
yeah, we can hear you. Great.
I'm trying to share my screen, but it won't let me while you're sharing.
Right, that is correct. You cannot share your screen, but we are happy to listen to your testimony.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. The Victorian Society, New York finds this proposal would further the inconsistency of the ground floor infill on the building to its detriment. I'm Lynn Funk, a licensed architect, Victorian Society, and I live 2 doors down from the Ansonia. The existing infill matches that at the nearby Margot Patisserie. It was approved by the commission as mentioned by the applicant. We asked if there was a master plan for ground infill, and if not, hopefully there will be one developed that the commission can work with the applicant to address these concerns in advance. We find that the dimensional details of the proposal are troubling. Each door leaf has a wide and a narrow stile when the stiles on each side of the leaf should match, as at the existing doors. The center muntin in the transom should either match the width of the center door stiles, or the muntin should at least be consistent across the transom. The transom bar should be wider, and the transom pane should be consistent width, not 3 different sizes. The proposed steel material we also question, even though I know that the top Art Nouveau infill appears to be steel, because it won't resemble in detail the infill of other historic or historically appropriate wood doors on the facade, including the one at Patisserie Margot. The photos show how much non-historic metal frame infill there is in the building, and tells us that we really do need to there should be a master plan. At least I would hope that you'd be able to show the tax photo, the applicant could show the tax photo to underscore their idea that this was a window, which I've heard that it wasn't. Finally, we don't understand the accessibility argument behind this door replacement in this configuration. An automatic door operation of both leaves solves the problem of each leaf being too narrow. Plus, it doesn't even help to have one leaf being less than 32 inches if that's the minimum. There appears to be enough room to us that you could have equal leaves. You could have an automatic motor door operated as an ADA solution. I understand about the push bar requirements. I do not think the width shown is needed in the middle of the door, but in any case, we believe that this application should be refined so that it better matches the multi-pane proportions of the door that is there now and was previously approved, which is similar to the Margot door and also similar to the entry from 74th Street to the apartment building. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And that is it for signups, and I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, thank you. And Rich, do we have any additional written testimony?
No other additional written testimony.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to address the comments raised in the testimony. You did have some very supportive comments, but the last speaker spoke specifically about details and the proportions and questioned the need for such a change in those details and proportions. So do you want to speak to that? Perhaps it's a manufacturer choice versus a requirement. If you could speak to that, that would be helpful.
Yes, in regards to the auto operator relieving you from the requirement of accessibility, it does relieve you from maneuverability clearance requirements, but it does not relieve you from the door width requirement, which is the reason why we have the slightly asymmetrical door, approximately an inch, which would not be really conceivable by your eye as you're passing.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so we'll move toward closing our hearing and beginning our discussion. And so I have sent a request to unmute all of you. Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to take a stab at starting this one?
Sure. I think this is a little challenging. But listening to all of the testimony, both from the applicant and from and basically from the community, I feel like the issue here, and in looking at it, is just all about the proportions, and the thick mullion in the transom just doesn't seem to work. I understand that you have to that it's necessary to have a particular width when you do the crash bar, but when I look at the door itself and the proportions of the framing and the mullions, I just feel like it's still a little off and it needs a little more work. And so the applicant could either work with staff to accomplish that, if all the other commissioners agree, or come back to us with some refinements.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so we'll see how that goes, and if it's something that other commissioners think that the staff can handle, resolving the proportions to get sort of just thinner styles, I think, to get the right proportions. And Commissioner Jefferson, do you feel the same?
I feel the same. The proportions are off, and I think they can be adjusted. I still don't understand why the two leaves can't open up at the same time, and have better proportions. But I think it needs more study.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I agree with what the prior two commissioners said, but I would be interested in hearing what the other commissioners have to say about what their understanding of the ADA requirements with regard to this particular situation.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I think that I think that our staff can work with staff to refine these details. I also wonder if it might be possible to have, if they've considered a push plate, an automatic door without an actual handle at all. But in any event, I do think that our staff can work with the applicant to resolve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. The proportions are very strange, and I think there's room for improvement here. I've seen other steel doors where I know you have to have a solid portion for the lock set, and I've seen that sort of take the place of one of the panes of glass, call it, whereas the rest of the pattern can run through, and that might be less jarring than having that wide band all the way across at the push bar. So I think they could probably work with staff to work that out.
Thank you, and that's a helpful suggestion. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree with other commissioners that the proportions are awkward and some of the details. But I'm sure they can work with the staff on this and still accommodate the needed handicapped and access.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, I agree with what other people are saying, totally staff acceptable. Two comments. First of all, I mean, my knowledge of ADA is far from perfect, but I thought that the clear opening required was 34 inches with the door jamb included. So if you were to cut this in half with the door open, you probably would have 34 inches, but I can't do the math in my head. But you know, the applicant can certainly, if they can be made equal, that's great. I think Ann's idea was great for the single solid panel. They could also do a blank recessed panel where the grid read across and the inside was flush, but the outside carried the grid across. And you could also do an offset vertical bar or pull, which would allow the center rails or the edge rails of each door left and right to be thinner. Right now, you've got this very heavy center rail on each one, and that's basically to accommodate the pull. If you did an offset pull, you probably would be able to narrow that down. But I think staff can handle all this stuff.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, by the way,
Commissioner,
we should always we should pay as much attention to this on. Now, I was thinking of that job that we did with like the Empire Stores building or something like that. We should spend this much time on the doors on the big jobs that we do on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
I agree with most of the comments. The proportions are a little bit off, and the Commissioner Hoffer-Smith's suggestions are excellent. So is Commissioner Goldblum's. There must be a way to tweak it to make it more in line with the historic fabric.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Commissioner Bland.
The wrap up. So we have a willing architect. We have given dimensional issues related to hardware, and we have a fabulous staff. And now who knew? Well, I knew. We have 2 or 3 incredibly detail-oriented commissioners around the table. So I think we don't need to see this again. Working through all of that, we'll get it right.
All right, great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll make a motion to approve it with modifications that they continue to work with the staff on the proportions and details, and we will explore all of the suggestions that commissioners you've made today, which have been very helpful. So Commissioner Lutfi, would you make the motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket LPC 21-30, 033-27-2101 Broadway, the Ansonia French Beaux-Arts style apartment hotel designed by Paul E.M. Du Bois and built in 1899 to 1904. The application is to replace doors. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the removal of the existing modern replacement doors will not eliminate any significant architectural features, that the proposed steel material for the doors and transom will harmonize with other historic and modern metal infill found at the building space, and that the proposed doors and transom will feature a black finish, which will be in keeping with the dark finished storefront infill at the base of the building and help to change the material remain a discrete However, I find that the proposed doors will not match historic doors found at the base of the building in terms of configuration and details, and that the large mullion at the transom and the solid middle rail at the doors have awkward proportions and detract from the entrance. Therefore, I recommend that the applicant work closely with staff to modify and refine the proportions, configuration, and details of the doors and transom so that they'll be more in keeping with historic doors at the building. Looking at all the suggestions that the commissioners have made.
Sarah, you're muted.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay. And Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Letby,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved. Please continue to work with the staff on the details and proportions, and we'll move to our next and final item.
Thank you.
Okay, going to item number 5, LPC 21-06153, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of the Bronx, Block 3190, Lot 1, 2500 Jerome Avenue, the St. James Episcopal Church individual landmark, a Gothic Revival style church and parish house designed by Henry Dudley and constructed in 1863. The application is to modify walking paths, construct a ramp, replace windows, and install HVAC units and retaining walls.
And the applicant has joined the hearing. You may now begin.
Thank you, commissioners. My name is Thomas with Barry Donaldson Architects, and I'll be doing the presentation for 2500 Jerome Avenue. You might be familiar with this project as it late last year, the commission approved a larger development on the site of affordable housing that will help to fund the restoration and preservation of the church. The original building, as a reminder, designed by Henry C. Dudley, was completed in 1865. And in 1895, an addition of a parish house was added. And some pictures of the current condition from around the site. And then again, as a reminder, the development footprint to the north and a snapshot of our project. And I'll start going into the elements. The first of which is the pathways along the site. We'll be changing the footprint, particularly to the north, where the pathway meets the new development. We'll be changing slightly how it turns the corner and embellishing it a bit in front of the building to allow space for congregants to gather. You can see on the site, parts of the walkway are bluestone, and we'll be replacing and resetting the pathways in the existing bluestone where they are bluestone. You can see also at the bottom left here, the pathway along the side and front of the church is this white concrete, and we'll be replacing that with bluestone and matching it to the existing bluestone. Looking at a rendering, you can see how the new pathway will become a bluestone pathway all the way around the building. And then another view of that here. Moving on, the next intervention that we'll be doing is the steps at the nave or the entrance to the nave. We'll be rebuilding those and slightly changing their configuration. So you can see the existing step has this sandstone tread/landing and what was later added, these concrete steps. And we simply want to rebuild this with sandstone treads and risers, but adding a single riser to accommodate a very slight regrading at the entrance to the nave. The next and probably largest intervention we'll be doing is the vestibule and ramp, which will provide the ADA accessible entrance to the church itself. So you can see here on the left the historical vestibule and what it looks like right now. You can see right now there is a ramp that actually continues through the vestibule itself. So this is not a compliant ramp in any way and can't really be made compliant without rebuilding the vestibule as we propose. One thing before I showed the renderings, and we discussed this with staff, is you can see on the historical photo that there is some half timbering incorporated into the detailing of the vestibule. While it's not shown in the renderings, this is something that we will be incorporating into the final design. So you can see here the vestibule with the ramp, the landing, and stairs joining the bluestone pathways. The landing will be bluestone with a sandstone piece laid in to match the motif that was done on the landing further to the east, which is an original piece. The treads will be bluestone, and then the ramp will be bluestone tinted concrete. The railing itself will be made to match existing railings on the site. And just as a quick note, the railings, metal railings on the site date from the 30s, and they're original Blum railings that we'll be replacing. And Blum still makes the profiles that were put in the 30s. So we'll be redoing those with the exact same ones that are still in production. And again, showing the railing and the ramp and steps and some of the details. The next intervention will be at the southeastern portion of the site, where we'll be putting in a new retaining wall and two HVAC heat pump units. You can see right now there is a riprap retaining wall that's in bad condition. And we propose to build a retaining wall in a random rubble pattern matching the foundation of the existing church. And there's quite a quick grade change that happens. So as you move along the back alleyway, we can put a pad for our HVAC units and put them behind this retaining wall. And then obviously the retaining wall has a planting strip and a view from 190th Street looking. And you can see how even very delicate plantings should be able to cover the HVAC units quite easily. And you can see a section of that here, just how far down they go. The next part of the work is the back alleyway, and we'll be rebuilding the back alleyway pathways completely. So you can see pictures of the existing handrail and a deteriorated walkway. Coincidentally, in this back picture, and there'll be another picture coming up, you see some bluestone pathway laid in the back here. We'll be taking that up, and that will actually help to create some of the bluestone we'll be laying in the front of the building. So here you can see an elevation of the back alleyway, and this back alleyway ramping system and handrail will be an ADA compliant path of egress from the basement of the church, from the parish house. And you could see a rendering looking north with handrails painted black and also blue pigmented concrete. and then a rendering looking south. A picture of part of the work will be in the back alleyway, will be reconfiguring the stairway to the cellar. You can see right now it forms this lightning bulb shape and will be creating a switchback stair in this corner in the back alley. The last part of the work we propose is, so first of all, while all the windows in the parish house, including the monumental windows, will be getting either refurbished or replaced in kind, we can handle that all at staff level. This one window here that's highlighted, we call it the type 3 window. We ask a commissioner's approval to change. So right now you can see that this window is part of a set of 5 windows. There's one on Jerome Avenue and 3 others in the back alley. Right now, this window is the only one that remains with leaded glass. It has a fixed leaded glass light at the bottom and an awning pivot light at the top. We would like to replace this with clear glazing and change the operation of the top awning to a fixed light. And some of the details of that. So that's the end of my presentation, and I look forward to all of your comments.
Okay, thank you. And commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, not seeing any questions at this time. Let's see if we have any public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I'm going to turn it over to Anthony to take us through the testimony.
Yes, we have one sign up, and that is Kelly Carroll, and I will bring her into the meeting. Kelly, you should be able to speak now.
Great, thank you. Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. Overall, this was an excellent presentation. One detail that our committee could not determine was if the paving material of the ramp will also be bluestone to match the other pathways. Thank you.
The paving material of the ramp itself will be blue tinted concrete. That's what we are proposing right now.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Rich, do we have any other speakers? I mean, Anthony, do we have any other speakers?
We do not have any other speakers, and I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, great. And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do. We have a resolution from Bronx Community Board 7. They recommended approval.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think the one question that was raised in testimony has been answered. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? All right. Okay, and I think we'll move to our discussion, and I'm going to start to request to unmute all of you, so look for that. And Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So this is for site work all around the church to include some reconfiguring of the pathway, installing new bluestone, and a new ramp tinted to match the bluestone on one side. And Commissioner Bland, would you like to start the discussion?
Sure. I'm hoping and assuming that this broad range of improvements to this once beleaguered church, but strong and there all these years later with the completely changed urban environment around it, is a result of our approval finally of a development adjacent to the church, and the proceeds, which I presume will enable the church to do these things. I'm just assuming those things. I hope I'm right. In any case, I think all of the improvements very well presented. Thank you very much to the architect. Very clear, are all great. I mean, we always hesitate when we see a stained glass window going, leaded glass in this case too. And I'm sure that this church is clearly enjoys its historic condition enough to save that window and reuse it maybe just as a hanging or something on the inside as part of the original, or at least part of the old fabric of the church, even if it wasn't original. So all in all, I think this is an admirable series of upgrades to a wonderful, the little engine that could up here. So.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Yeah, I agree. It's very exciting that we have reached this part of this larger project, and I think it looks terrific and can improve.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it's very appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yep, I'm fine with it too.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yes, I think all the changes are really positive and the additions.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree. I think everything's very appropriate.
Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Agreed.
Commissioner Chen?
Agree as well. Glad to hear the comment about that. We have been integrated.
Okay, great. All right. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make the motion for this item?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 21-06153, 2500 Jerome Avenue, St. James Episcopal Church, an individual landmark. The application is to modify walking paths, construct a ramp, replace windows, and install HVAC units and retaining walls. I recommend approval, finding that the materials and layouts for the pathways are based on existing and historic conditions found at the site and will be consistent with other paving found at the site in terms of materials, finishes, dimensions, and pattern. That the maximum amount of intact bluestone pavers will be salvaged and reinstalled. That the undulating width of the new pathways will help them blend into the surrounding landscape and remain a harmonious secondary presence. That the installation of new pathways will not result in the removal of mature trees or detract from any prominent vistas. That the new ramps and extended landings located along the east 190th Street facade and in the rear west alley will provide barrier-free access to the church without disturbing architectural features of the building's base. That the materials of the new ramps featuring new and salvaged cut granite, field stone, sandstone, and bluestone tinted concrete set upon a concrete structure will be consistent with the paving materials found throughout the complex and will harmonize with the facade. That the new railings at the ramps will match the materials, details, and profiles of existing railings on site. That the location of the retaining walls and mechanical equipment at the southeast corner will be partially screened by the historic fences, gates, and new plantings and will not detract from the significant features of the building or the streetscape. That the existing leaded glass window to be removed at the rear alley is not visible from the street, is in a highly deteriorated condition, and is not commensurate with other remaining church window glazing in terms of color and craftsmanship. That the window will be replaced with a clear glass window to match the materials, details, and configuration of others in the building. And that the proposed work will not detract from the special character of the individual landmark or the surrounding site.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and unopposed, the motion carries.
Okay, so that's approved. Thank you very much. Good luck. And that concludes our day today. Thank you all, members of the public, staff, and commissioners most of all. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend. And actually, we won't see you next week. We'll see you the following week on April